You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
For much of 2021, we've only heard about predictions of the next wave of COVID-19, about new variants like Delta and Delta Plus, and rising number of COVID cases. But for the first time, we have received news that India may be in the final stages of this pandemic. In an interview with The Wire on 25th August, the World Health Organization's top scientist, Dr Soumya Swaminathan, said that India could have reached some stage of endemicity. Essentially, an endemic is defined as a stage in the pandemic when the virus is only present in small areas of the population and the rate of infection within that population is predictable. Some examples of an endemic disease are like chickenpox, malaria, and even the common cold. In the interview, Dr. Swaminathan stated that it is likely that the current stage of COVID cases may continue with a few local surges and COVID may transform as an endemic by the end of 2022. However, she pointed out that vaccinations and COVID-appropriate behavior will be an essential component to facilitate this transformation. At present, only about 10% of India's population has been fully vaccinated, which excludes 18-year-olds. The National Institute of Disaster Management recently also predicted that a third wave is likely to peak in October. So, how close is India exactly to enter the COVID endemic stage, and what would that future look like? Will masks no longer be a part of society? Will there be no future waves or variants? To answer these questions for today's episode, we spoke to Gautam Menon, a professor at the Department of Physics and Biology at Ashoka University. You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline-making news for you, and I'm your host, Himmat. In the early stages of the pandemic, there were many theories on how COVID could be kicked out of our lives. Some said that COVID may disappear on its own with the summer heat or via herd immunity. However, history has shown that when a new virus does emerge, it is nearly impossible to eradicate it. For example, malaria, which according to one research paper is as old as humanity, but continues to infect large sections of the Indian population. Now, COVID cases in India are currently slowing down compared to the surge in the second wave. According to COVID-19India.org, which curates state and central bulletins for COVID data, the 7-day average for new daily cases in India is only 33,000. But states like Kerala, who have high testing rates, are reporting daily cases of nearly 20,000. To add to the list of worries is the latest report from the National Institute of Disaster Management, which states that a third wave of COVID-19 is likely to hit in October and will affect children more. So, is it too soon to start treating COVID in India as an endemic? How close are we really to that stage? We asked Professor Gautam Menon at Ashoka University this question, and he says that India still has ways to go to reach an endemic stage, especially in states like Kerala, which have low seroprevalence.
I think we still have a way to go. If you look at the most recent ICMR sero surveys, they say that on average, about 65-66% of India has been infected or has antibodies to COVID-19 coming from a vaccination. You would want to push that number to up to at least about 85, I think. So that's really the gap that vaccinations have to fill. So we do have a way to go. We are very close to that stage in a lot of North India and a lot of the big cities, but we are somewhat more distant from that in Kerala, for example, which had the lowest among all Indian states of seropositivity. So Kerala still has a way to go, and that's why we are seeing a resurgence of infections in Kerala. It's not increasing very fast. It's a steady background, and that's what we might expect from a disease that is endemic.
So what exactly would an endemic stage look like? Would masks no longer be a mandate? Would future waves of COVID not occur? There are some scenarios of an endemic which few countries are testing out at the moment. For example, Singapore recently announced plans to ease COVID restrictions to find a way to live with the virus. The island country has been successful so far in curbing the virus and has vaccinated close to 67% of its population. Similar strategies have also been adopted in countries like New Zealand, who for the past 6 months did not report a single case of COVID, but went into a snap lockdown for 3 days after a single case was detected in its capital. And England, which imposed one of the longest lockdowns in the world, recently eased all restrictions and even lifted the legal requirement to wear a mask in public. But for a country like India, which has one of the largest populations, majority of it still unvaccinated, what would an endemic look like? Professor Menon weighs in.
so many people in India have already been infected or have received a shot of vaccine that a substantial fraction of our portion is protected at this point. So this means that we shouldn't see the sort of very sharp increase that we saw in the second wave in India. What we will see is maybe a gentle hill, maybe a series of gentle hills, maybe a steady background for a while, but nothing approaching something like 410,000 cases per day that we were seeing in the second wave, at the peak of the second wave. When a disease becomes endemic, what it means is that it survives at some low level within the population. So at any given time, there's always a certain number of cases of COVID-19 in your population, but it doesn't grow and it doesn't shrink to zero. It's somewhere in between where there's always some constant number. The reasons that disease becomes endemic is typically because you're allowed to reinfect. If you've caught it once, that doesn't mean that you can't catch it again a year down the line or 2 years down the line. Another reason, of course, is that you're supplying new susceptible people because new children are being born who've not been vaccinated for until they get their vaccinations. There again, they can be infected by the COVID-19. And even though that infection may be mild, they're still counted as potential infections. What we might expect longer term, as we do, for example, there are other coronaviruses that cause a common cold. So that's it's of the same category of virus, but it's a different sort of virus. And that common colds, of course, are with us all constantly. They're a background to our existence. Something like that may happen, or is most likely to happen with COVID-19. It will stay in the background of the population for most people, especially if you've been vaccinated. It might mean something like a cold, a bad flu. It will last for a couple of days, but it's very, very unlikely to kill you. It's very, very unlikely to send you to hospital. The question here is more, how do we get used to living under such a situation? Once we begin to think of it, once we realize that having been fully vaccinated, we are very strongly protected against adverse consequences of the disease, and we can ramp up that protection by taking a booster dose or a third dose of the vaccination. And we might have to do that once every 2 years, 3 years, maybe a year and a half. But we are protected against serious consequences. Once that is assured, then we should really think of this as just like another flu.
As Dr. Menon says, vaccinations are an essential part of transforming the pandemic to an endemic. Currently, Bharat Biotech's Covaxin and Serum Institute of India's Covishield are the main vaccines being administered in India, the latter being used to inoculate the majority of the population. According to experts, to reach an endemic stage, at least 80 to 90% of the population needs to be completely vaccinated. At present, only 35% of India's population has received a single dose of the vaccine, and only 10% receiving both. However, there also exists a disparity in the rate of vaccinations in urban areas versus rural areas of India. According to a recent Times of India report, rural India received only 51% of vaccine doses of the total population, even though the majority of the people live there. According to Dr. Menon, India needs to ramp up its vaccination rate to 10 to 15 million doses per day compared to the 5 to 7 million we are currently doing to reach the endemic stage by 2022.
But right now, we're vaccinating between 4 and 7 million per day. And I think the last week has been somewhat good. The numbers have been closer to 7 million, but the weeks before that have been a little more disappointing at about 4 million per day. Ideally, we should be vaccinating between 10 and 15 million people per day. So that is feasible. Until now, the constraints have been supply constraints. Now those constraints are being relaxed. There are more vaccines on the market. There's a larger bucket of choice for vaccines. If we do that, and already, I must point out, we've vaccinated over 50% of the eligible population of India, the 960 million odd of our population. More than 50% of them have already been vaccinated with one dose. What we need to do is to push that up to 90% plus of that population, as well as simultaneously push up the second dose. Once you get to at least about 85 to 90% of the population protected with 2 doses, and if we ramp up vaccination sufficiently, maybe early next year might be a time when we can achieve that target. That I think we would be in a much better position to deal with what might happen in the future.
But if COVID is going to stay with us for a long time, how long will the protection from vaccines last? Will we require booster doses of COVID vaccines? The conversation on booster doses was recently brought up by the US government, who announced on 18 August that all Americans who have received 2 doses of vaccines would be eligible for an additional jab of Pfizer and Moderna vaccine. The announcement was in light of the surge in breakthrough infections due to the Delta variant, which has quickly spread across the country. However, the science behind booster doses is contested. According to a recent paper by the WHO, the use of booster doses is dependent on waning vaccine effectiveness or a decline in protection against severe disease in the general population. It pertinently states that, and I quote, To date, the evidence remains limited and inconclusive on any widespread need for booster doses following a primary vaccination series. Dr. Menon believes that it is likely that we will need booster doses in the future to refresh our immune system as the virus continues to evolve. However, he said that the period after which a booster dose needs to be taken requires more research and data.
I think it's likely that we will need. There is, of course, a vaccine for flu, which a large number of people don't take. The uptake is usually larger in Western countries and relatively low in India. But like that, because strains of the virus change from year to year, it's required to refresh your immune system with a dose of the vaccine, with one more vaccine dose at intervals. It's done every year for influenza. It's likely. Right now, we don't know enough about the immune response to COVID-19 to be able to tell whether one needs it after 6 months, after a year, after 2 years, etc. But hopefully that information will come in. Currently for India, I think the priority should be to get first and second doses to as many, first doses to as many people as possible, followed up by second doses, and then maybe think about booster doses or third shots for people who are immunocompromised or for some reason have a lower immune response to create fewer antibodies, for example, to the disease when they encounter it, or to a vaccine. That I think should be the priority. We should worry about the booster shots a little later. Right now, the priority is to get the first shot into as many arms as possible.
It is now clear that COVID will remain in our lives for a very long time. An endemic may not be the ending to the COVID pandemic that many people wish for, but it does project a more safer future than we are in right now. If you liked listening to this episode, please subscribe to The Big Story for episodic updates. We're available on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website, and for any feedback, please shoot an email to podcast@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.